Hi everyone, welcome to Inside SONOR Family. I'm your host, Zack Stewart. As always, coming to you from my home studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. And joining me today from Los Angeles, California is a fellow SONOR artist, Mr. Jared Shavelson. Jared, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you guys doing?
Good, man. Well, obviously we're going to get into, all this great SONOR drum stuff that we get to play. But before that, I've kind of been talking to everybody about what they've been up to during the pandemic and staying busy. And I know for you, in a normal time, you're working with a large number of bands out of Los Angeles area. And for the people at home who may not be maybe familiar with all the different projects you got going on, I mean, you really cover a huge spectrum from, like a hardcore band like Boy Sets Fire all the way to, a pop singing legend like Seal. So since I'm sure all of that has been reduced greatly or completely non-existent, what have you been up to during all this time to kind of stay busy and keep yourself motivated and keep yourself kind of pushing forward?
Yes, you're right. None of it's been happening. Out of all the different bands that I do play with and, either I'm a member of or I get hired to play for, no one's really been able to figure too much stuff out. So I do have one band that I started here about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and we all tour so much that it's worked out well. We've been able to take this time to work on our second album. So we've been writing a ton, and we've been in the studio with the producer Brad Wood, who's a legend for like rock music. He's incredible. So yeah, we've been doing that, and that's been really fun. So I pretty much just spend all my time in this room, either writing songs with them or just practicing by myself. I've got, a bunch of my old books out, and I just started going through all my old books, like college stuff, and just breaking it all down, and so just locking myself in here, playing and trying to prepare for that phone call of which band is going to do it first. So every week I'll pick one of the artists I play with and just freshen up like the repertoire, just to make sure that if they call me, I'm ready. I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to forget the songs,
Yeah. We've had a couple of shows of social distance setups and whatnot. And since this all started, and we got sound check, and, some of it's muscle memory, but then a few little things, because the guy I play for, his name's Jared Neiman. We'd had actually a really busy tour in February. And so the band was really kicking. And then, of course, a lot of things shut down, and it's kind of funny how quickly some of the kind of little nuanced stuff that we had worked out and just kind of organically happened. You forget about it because you never really thought through it the first time. It was just kind of something that happened over the process of playing. So we were supposed to have a show a few weeks ago, and same thing. I was going back and listening to the board tape, like, yeah, exactly. What was that transition? How are we doing it? Because you think you'll remember, but then you kind of get to the moment, and you're like, oh yeah, I haven't done this gig in 6 months.
Right, you don't want to be the one that forgets.
Yeah, exactly.
If another guy forgets, that's okay, but I don't want to be the one that forgets.
Yeah. Or you kind of, you have that big diamond and it's a swell, and you kind of see everybody looking on stage like, what comes next? Like, is it, do you start it? Do I start? No, totally, man.
You're right. It's all those small little things that you work out just from organically playing together. And I listen to all of our board mixes, and I hear the progression. Like for Seal, like depending if it's like the tour or if it's a fly date or, what songs we're doing and how they go back to back. We just had this thing that we never worked out, but it works. And we figured it out. And like, those are the things that I fear the most when I get this much time away from something, diving back in. I know how to play the songs. It's not that. I'll never forget how to play the songs.
Yeah.
It's that small stuff. It's the body language, reading the body language on when something's going to be extended or when I need to stop a track or start it, or like all those small things that we just learned from playing with each other.
Yeah. We with the tour we were doing before this and kind of the setup and arrangements of some of the songs, same thing. We were extending some outros, intros. Jared wanted to be a little bit looser, which is cool, and it was really fun. But it's one of those things that takes you. If you're kind of out back to back, which is rare for Nashville, but we were doing that for about 3 weeks. You just kind of find those. Oh well, this this length of a guitar jam works, or maybe the guy starts repeating this certain phrase and I kind of catch that, and that really sets us up well for that intro, that next tune. And again, it's stuff you never really, we didn't sit down and practice it. It was just starting with that initial thought of, well, let's see where it goes. And we found a spot, but then, you know, when you get removed from it, it does unfortunately go away.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had so many things, and again, I'll use Seal as another reference for that, but where we would, maybe at one point with me playing with him, it was a lot of tracks, and then we took them all away. You know, when we did Rock in Rio this last year, it was very organic, and it was an incredible thing that we came up with, but we didn't sit down and figure out what tracks to take out or what to put in, or, you know, we didn't work on that. We just decided we wanted to have this organic feel for the songs, and it was really an amazing thing, but I think it came from performing with each other so frequently. Yeah.
We had a similar thing about maybe a year and a half ago. We took out all the tracks, and for when we do these smaller shows, we get rid of, a couple of the players of the band, keys and auxiliary guitar and percussion. So that was kind of a thing for me of like, what do I need to fill in that he was doing, you know, because I didn't really want to like make percussion loops or tracks. And that, again, the vibe Jared wanted was like, you get the four guys you see up here on stage, is what, you know, that's the sound. And how can we reapproach these songs without some of that stuff? But yeah, like you said, it's a little bit of trial and error. If you sit down, I think, and kind of think through it, doesn't really work. You kind of have to get with the other players and see how they're interpreting it. You know, maybe the guitar player is picking up more of a line, or, you know, Jared plays acoustic as well. Maybe he's getting more of a rhythm thing going. So yeah, it was a little bit of like, I thought through a few of those transitions when we got rid of the tracks and the other guys for some of these shows. But you kind of have to just adjust on your feet on the gig, you know?
Totally. And it's different per gig. And I mean, even it's different per night, you know, like it changes all the time.
Yeah.
But I love that. That's like, that's my favorite part about performing live. That's like, I think that's what I miss the most, is like, you know, you'll get up on stage and you have those, say 2.5 hours maybe of work time that, you know, things come really close to going wrong often.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that makes me feel alive. Like I want that, you know?
Yeah.
And I've worked with a couple different people that don't want that. They wanted to be like, starts here, ends here, smooth sailing, no thought. We did what we did in the rehearsal space. We do it here. And I could do that, you know, of course. But those shows aren't as memorable to me, you know? Yeah.
No, I feel you on that, man. I think it's a healthy balance. Like, you know, when I've had times where I'm subbing or playing with a lot of different bands, kind of like, you know, you do quite often, there's always a bit of a challenge. Like, it's a new gig and maybe there's no rehearsal. So it's like almost like a personal thing of like, all right, I walked away from that gig, either no rehearsal or just one, and I nailed it. But it was just like getting the parts. I definitely wasn't like, I mean, I was focused obviously in the moment, but I wasn't owning the gig. It was just like, no one noticed that I was first time playing with them or whatever. So that's an aspect, and that's cool. But yeah, I've seen gigs, you know, especially like with some of the opening acts in Nashville, on some of the bigger tours. I mean, if you're given 18 minutes, you got 18 minutes, you know, and it is not pretty when you start playing 20 minutes because you're one of many acts. So I've even seen it, which I think is, someone told me is a thing in the church world as well. I don't really know, I'm playing that world, but where the 18 minutes was like one track. I mean, you hit start and he's like, boom, you end the song, and then you already hear the count in for the next song.
Yeah.
So everything is like, and I understand the logistics side of that. And I think, again, like early on, I'd probably be like, yeah, I nailed it, man. The transitions were great. Everything was spot on. I was like a machine. But then after a while, you kind of want those moments that happen organically, or the freedom to have those moments night to night, you know?
Yeah, I've had some of those gigs where you have to, you know, sometimes they're so small where you can't even set up, where the band itself is so small, when you have that spot, you don't even set up you're not using tracks. So you're in the rehearsal space and you're just reminding everybody, like, this is how quick it's going to go. And, and you just have to hope that they remember, because you're like, when I'm on that stage and our time starts, like, I'm not stopping, because you said you wanted 6 songs. We're going to get those 6 songs in.
Yeah. That's always the, no one wants to look like anxious looking around at you, but then you're also wondering like, they're messing with their guitar pedals. Are they good? Should I start?
Isn't that the worst?
I know. Yeah. That should be a course like that. Like if they can recreate that, whatever, probably 3 seconds, but it feels like 10 minutes that every drummer has to experience. When you're on a gig where you don't know you don't have the nuances of all the players. If it's one where maybe the lead guitar player starts, you don't know if he's going to freak out, if he wants it to, breathe a little longer. Of course, if you're working for a singer, maybe they want our moments. So you're just guessing and you got to start. And I know I've had it where you start and you kind of get the whoa over the microphone. All right. And you're like, oh man, now I'm that guy, know?
When they look at you and they look at you and they go, whoa, hang on. You really called,
I know. That's the worst. Yeah, for sure. Oh, hey. Yeah. So if somebody can recreate that feeling at one of these drum camps, nothing else, no playing, just we're going to surround you with a band and you're going to get called out in front of everybody trying to direct the ship,
we're working on how far you can see your spread of the stage and make sure you can read everybody so you can start the song right.
Yeah,
that's where long hair comes into play, because you could just put it in front of you and the crowd can't see you panicking wide-eyed like, what's happening?
I know, exactly. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. That's a good idea. Usually it's just put the head down and breathe and wipe away a few tears and, you roll on to the next one.
Yeah, you get in between song glasses, right? So after you hit the last hit, you put them on, you look around, take them off, start the next song.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's, I'm sure some people watching at home have played in a band or had that experience. And it's never fun, because at the end of the day, our mistakes as a drummer, everyone notices. If you start smashing on a hi-hat, counting a new tempo in, it's not the right time. Everybody, they don't have to be a drummer, they don't have to be a musician. They know that something was weird, especially if you get called out by the person with the microphone, which is,
you're also the easiest to blame, even if it's not yours, because you're stationary. And so instead of looking side to side, everyone could just look back and look at you. And it's just like, their facial expression doesn't matter to the crowd anymore. They could be looking at you saying sorry, but it looks like you messed up because they do a quick turn around to you.
Yeah, I think I've always subtly, when I've been with somebody for a while, like basically changed unless the transitions were like set, this is what we do every night, I've got a good memory for like, oh, this is what we did. And I try to like get everybody on pace for that so that it is, again, allowing if something needs to go longer or something happens and we have to take a little bit longer before we start a song, but to where there is like a feeling of like, all right, within this point, or, hopefully the singers banter, they say the same stuff or similar to the same stuff every night. So you kind of know where it's going because, again, there's nothing worse than all of a sudden in the middle of their story, they intro the song and it's quiet. And then again, you have those 3 seconds that feel like 10 minutes. And you're like, oh, you're now you look like, because you were trying to be sensitive and paying attention, now you look like the person who wasn't on the ball the whole time. So the pains of being a touring drummer for different people.
I've had a couple really interesting ones. A good example of like, maybe which turned out to be one of the hardest but most fun gigs I did was playing with the Aquabats. And if you're not familiar with the Aquabats, they're just they're like a ska punk band, but they dress up as superheroes. And so you have to wear like goggles and like a full, outfit. And so the goggles, even though they're not real like lenses or anything, they just kind of block the sides of your eyes enough that it's really hard to read the entire stage. And so we did a rehearsal like a month and a half before the tour started, and I went on tour with Boys That's Fire in Europe and then flew to England to meet them to start this tour. And the first show was at the O2 in Glasgow. And so no rehearsals in over a month now. And I haven't seen the guys. I've never worn the outfit, so I didn't know what it was like to play in it. And then it's freezing cold and raining, and I have to put this outfit on and try and remember these songs. And I'm also controlling the video screen behind us because the songs sync up to the video. But I didn't know that there was like a whole production. So when the singer says certain things happen on stage. Like a fight breaks out and I have to play like really fast beat, like fight beat. And then I have to follow along with who's fighting who so I could do the big hits because the crowd's seeing it, and then stop it when it's happening. And when you announce the band, it's a big thing. And then when you say this thing, it's the lead into the next song. I didn't know all this. So he's just, at the O2 in Glasgow, they were like, stop. So this is, we have to explain this to him because he's never played with us before, but this is, and you have to make up this whole story like of who I am because they all have characters that like, you know, I was the drummer's cousin because he wasn't able to do it, and I have this superhero name as well. And so he was saying, when I do this, then you do this. Let's try. He does this. The crowd yells it at me, and I have to do it. Like it was definitely one of those moments where I was like, oh my god, like what is happening right now? You know, it's like playing for a Broadway play. But by the end of it, it's natural, right? 2 weeks later, it's totally natural, and nothing can go wrong. I see it all now.
Yeah, man, that's a lot. I've had not to that extent similar experiences. Something actually before I even was touring professionally. I grew up doing a lot of the drumline stuff in March WGI, and we decided, you know, that activity, the costuming is crazy. It's great, but it like, you know, early on in the early 2000s, everybody's just trying to do something different. So the group I was marching, the show costume uniform, decided to do these plastic masks, and they had this like face covering. The idea was to basically cover your face with almost like a kind of white mask thing in front of it. And I think our first contest was on a Saturday, and we're rehearsing either the weekend before or whatever. We never put these things on. And so I'll see you put this thing on, and I mean, you're literally having to keep track. You're moving, you're marching on a floor, like you're, you know, at like 180, 200 BPM, man. You're flying across the floor, and I can't see the other side. So I mean, anytime you do something that's going to affect hearing and all that, like that's something when I still work in that activity, I always tell, you know, whether it's my own groups I work with or groups that I consult with, like the first thing is I'm like, if you're gonna do something weird, practice day one with it, man. You know, have the kids get used to like exactly how it's going to be in the show, because I mean that affects, like you said, it literally can affect where you can see on stage. And then if you look at that activity where you've got all these, you know, kids with drums on, they're trying to play with the person next to them and literally stay close enough, you know, keep the appropriate distance. Like they're, you know, they've got to learn how to develop that and probably change their skill set a little bit to hear differently, and of course even to maybe see differently as far as like a point of reference goes.
Completely. I mean, you're using so many senses when you play drums that you start blocking one, it really changes what you're used to hear, like what you got used to doing. So now if you can't hear everything exactly the same, you might actually start playing too hard, or you know what I mean? Like it might start changing a lot of different things that you just need to adapt to, and it might be too late at that point.
Yeah, that's the other thing. When it happens, you just have to let it go by and know you'll deal with it later, whether it's rehearse it or get yelled at by somebody for it. But you know, you can't hang on to it in the moment, and then you're gonna blow the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it seems to always snowball in those situations if you don't get control of it. Sure,
but that's one of the things that makes you, I guess, or I guess like a professional, like which escalates you to another level of professionalism is not being thrown off by it. I mean, you are mentally, you're freaking out, but you're not performing like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's something too, I think, and I actually had on my notes here to, you know, chat with you. We can kind of get into it before we start talking more drum stuff. You know, you work with a lot of different artists, and that's unique. Even I think people don't quite understand, even in like music towns like LA, Nashville, New York. I mean, there's like for like the rock stuff in Nashville, there's kind of a handful of guys who do it all. And for what, you know, what there is a jazz, there's a lot of guys. So it's not, you know, very rarely do people get called to play with a lot of different styles of music. I think LA is different because there is just so much more of each style. You know, obviously Nashville, a lot of country. There are other genres happening here for sure at a high level, but I think LA is probably the most diverse as far as like top jazz people, top rock, top ska, punk, whatever, like all that's happening. So, you know, whether somebody's wanting to try to go into that level, or maybe they're just the person who's like in their hometown, maybe one of the better drummers, and is probably then getting called to play with all these different bands. Is there anything, you know, you can advise people on as far as how best to navigate when you're playing in such different genres, and of course then literally playing with different groups of people, from day to day or week to week.
Yeah, I mean, that's like kind of my whole thing. I mean, I think I wake up from nightmares of it, and then I have these amazing blissful moments of when I feel like I figured something out, and it's a very small thing, but this is my whole life is that exact question, But what I can say, there's multiple points. One, outside of playing, be cool and be on time,
Yeah.
Don't be difficult. Don't make things harder, because, that's a huge part of it. And the world is small, right? So the people that are there during your rehearsals, if you get them, or they're there for when you are traveling, they see your personality, right? And they're the ones who make the phone calls, the managers, the tour managers, like the people behind the scene. They're the ones who see and know a lot. So you should always just keep that in mind. Like just be cool. Don't be difficult. It's like, just do what you're supposed to do and just get along as best as you can, and always be early. Always be early.
Yeah.
And then another thing I guess you could say about the being diverse, I think that just comes from what you were talking about. If you're in a smaller town, I didn't necessarily grow up in a small town. I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, and there's a lot of musicians, but I grew up loving classic rock, and I never lost my love for that, even when I found punk rock. And then when I found punk, I never lost my love or when I found jazz, I never lost my love for punk. And when I decided I was going to go to school for jazz, all of those things stayed with me. And I kept, I felt they were important. And I thought that that's a big reason why I was able to cover such a wide range of artists and styles of music, is because I actually listen to and love all of that music. I listen to Seal. I love Seal's albums. And so for me to actually not just play it for a gig, it's something that I'm passionate about. When I hear it, I get chills when I play certain songs. It's still exciting to me. And that goes to the punk bands too. There's a misconception with I feel like punk and rock in a professional world, that sometimes they get looked down upon as like, oh, it's just a punk band versus the professional pop artists you're playing with or whatever. But it's not. It's the same. And I feel like just to always be treating every band like it is that biggest thing. It's important, in my opinion at least. I don't ever skimp on it. I do all the same prep work for the small punk band that needs me to do their demo to go in a headline Rock in Rio. It's the exact same preparation for me. So I think that that's a big thing. The other thing too is also know the difference of having control of playing in a punk band versus playing with Seal. I can't hit the drums the same, and I have to understand that. So the tuning is a little bit different. My stick weight is different. My cymbal choices are different. All that stuff. It doesn't make it, but it makes it easier for you.
Yeah. I think what I take away from that, and in a few different levels, is this, you're controlling what you can control, because especially when you're playing with different people, there's gonna be so many factors that are out of your control.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you're worrying about it from an employment standpoint, if you show up on time, they can't fire you for being not on time or being late.
Yeah.
If you learn the material, they can't fire you because they didn't know the songs, what you've controlled is kind of like a standard. And I think everybody who's successful in music, or at least as a sideman, has that. If you control a standard of expectation for yourself. And like you said, whether it's someone who's wanting you to do some super low budget, not going to really, make or break your career thing, to more of your, where you're making maybe a lot of your income from level gig. You approach it all with the same kind of standard of, not to be cheesy, but standard of excellence and expectation of yourself, going into it. And, I think that's, people don't get how difficult that is. Because like you said, you're looking at every aspect of it. Because I've seen, if you were to maybe break it down into categories of what you mentioned, I've seen maybe people hit like one category, they do another one, but then maybe they show up with always the wrong gear for the gig, and you're just like, dude, like, what are you doing, or they do all the other things right, but man, they can just not make bus call on time, or they can't get to an airport on time or lobby call, whatever. Like, so yeah, but I think, if you just kind of eliminate those things, I mean, the music business, even when it's not a pandemic, is already crazy enough, and can switch for no reason, and it's not fair, and it just happens. But if you're doing those things that you can control, I think, typically, at least I found in my career, things seem to line up more in your favor.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like if you show up early, then they can't fire you for being late, and that is part of it. But for me, it's more getting familiar with your surroundings, getting familiar with the vibe of the situation you're walking into. Because chances are you're walking into a tight-knit group, you're coming into their world. So for me, it's way easier to do that slowly. So if I get there early, then you get one person at a time. You're not getting everything all at once. And you're kind of getting a vibe on you watching the guitar tech set up, and you're seeing how that operates. And you're the drum tech on the gig, if there is one, you see how he's operating with you. And that gives you a sign of how they operated with another person. And you kind of get a vibe on, you'll hear them talking too, like, the boss is coming, the tone that they take when they're talking about it. So you know what to expect when the whole thing comes together, and allows me to really kind of prepare for whatever it is, and know that I've done my work, and that if a person has a certain temper towards one thing, you'll probably hear about that before it happens. So not to do that, there's a lot of different things that you can learn just from just being cool, and being on time, and being prepared, just do your job, but also all the natural stuff like the communication and the jokes and the bonds, all that. Well, that comes, that's not first, at least in my opinion, that's never first, and if it is first, it's also quickly forgotten about. And so I always prepare for the music first, and read the room. Read the room is a big thing.
Yeah, I've had a few situations. You talk about kind of one at a time. Get on the bus at midnight or something, getting ready to leave town. Like everybody comes with then everybody just goes to their bunk, and you kind of then wondering like, all right, well, what personalities am I going to wake up to tomorrow? Maybe get somebody who'll hang out in the front lounge, or you can kind of chat, like you said, and get the skinny, or maybe somebody on the gig already, so you can kind of find out, like you said, what the vibe is. But yeah, it's I think a lot of times you find people who are a musical player, and that they're listening to the music. I think that's a trait that maybe transfers over with people as well. Like the person who's just like the loudest in the room always doesn't ever ask you a question and then just spew over you as you talk and answer them. They're probably the dude who's just gonna be overplaying the same. He's probably gonna be the same on stage, So nobody wants to play with you, nobody wants to hang around with you. You're probably not gonna be on that gig for very long.
I mean, that brings up another point too. I think I learned this pretty early on, but there's a time and a place for when people should be paying attention to you versus you being part of the team, right? And I've noticed, in most of the pop gigs, I've only done a few pop gigs, but every single one of them, you're tucking the back, cymbals. Sometimes a cymbal is too much for a pop artist, that's not. So you have to be really careful, and you have to understand that you never ever overplay, unless it's hey, why aren't you playing enough? I always go for what's more on the recorded side rather than what's on the performance side. If they want to build it, they'll let you know. But I mean, I've done pop gigs where singers never heard her songs played with real instruments. It's always ever been on a computer. So throwing a cymbal into the mix at a rehearsal, the first time that she heard it, she was like, I don't like those. Don't use those things, It's just true. So I just taped them all up. And as we started playing the songs over a couple of weeks, I would slowly open it up a little bit more. But it's abrasive, and that was the first time I'd never experienced that before. a cymbal. I mean, I was playing with like brushes even, at certain points, and it was just too much. That frequency is just not familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they, again, it goes back to that, knowing your role, and they've got a job to do up there as well. Like as we were joking about earlier with our role sitting back there, if you're the singer, you're up there, you're controlling everything. Everybody's looking at you. So the last thing you want is something happening behind you that makes you question your confidence. There's already, again, there are enough stuff they're juggling. So
yeah,
it's funny for us to joke about and make things, but at the same time, I can get their, I can understand their frustration with it. Like you said, if you go into it with that consideration, then starting, dialing it back a little bit, just kind of making sure that everything you do is going to be what they're used to, whether it be the record, whether it be the board tapes of what the drummer before you was doing. So nothing's out of left field, and then they don't feel crazy. Man, getting into, obviously you work with all these different bands. Do you have and I ask this pretty much of everybody I've done these interviews with, what's kind of your go-to setup for each band? Do you like to change it up a lot? I'm sure you change up some sizes a little bit, but what's kind of the typical rig when you get called to do a gig?
This is, if I can use this, I don't know if you guys can see it, but right behind me, I think you can probably see that now, right?
Yeah,
for the most part.
On there. Yep.
This is my SQ2. I will use this kit for everything if I can. But I do change up between 10, 12, or 13 rack. And and I have a 14 and a 16 floor that I go between. Sometimes I'll use both, but I will always start with a 4-piece kit and add on if I need. And it's typically the 13. I just was recording. I just finished a session yesterday, and I just brought these back in today. So I was very excited to get them set up. But they wanted a 12 on the tom on the recording, and that's like a really aggressive punk band. And the 12-16 just made it sound more separated from a 13-16. Yeah. So it was easier to cut through. Guitars on 10, everything's on 10. Singers screaming as loud as possible. Guitars, there's 12 guitar tracks. They're all on 10. Everything's super loud. So just having a smaller size actually was able to cut through, and the tighter snare was able to cut through more.
Interesting.
But I will always start with this, and with when I can use my own kit.
What's the wood configuration on that SQ2?
So this is
the shells.
This is the whole kit, the 10, 12, 13, 14, 16, and the 22 are all the vintage shells with rosewood, with the rosewood veneer.
Yeah, no, it looks great, man. I love that finish.
Yeah, I love it. I'll tell you though, the vintage is pretty thin, and which is great for when you have to carry it because it's light. But it made me really nervous on tour just because it's not a thick kit.
Really?
So up here, you can't see, but on my loft up here, I have an 80s phonic. And sometimes I'll bring that out instead because it's like 9-ply beech or 12-ply beech for some of the shells. And it's so heavy, and the old hardware is super heavy. And I never worry about anything happening to that kit,
Yeah.
But it's heavy.
Yeah,
so,
those drums are tanks.
Yeah, so as long as I don't have to carry it, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is, and then the snare is the Artist Bell Bronze. The 6x14 Artist Bell Bronze. And that is actually my go-to snare for almost every genre. I've used it with every band I've played with. And it works every time. It works in every studio situation. It works on every live show. It's just, as long as I don't have to carry it. It's 30 pounds.
Yeah.
It's really
I don't have one. I've played a couple, and they're a beast. I'm trying to see on the camera there. Are those different hoops on it?
No.
Okay, so it was like it was chrome on the snare drum.
Oh, the snare drum, yes. Yes. Okay. So I took off the die cast hoops that come on it, and I put the hella hoops on. So you want me to pull it over here? I could show you.
Sure, yeah. That's it, man. I literally I love the hella hoops. Like, I'm not a big die-cast fan, but I have a bunch of hella hoops, and I always said this. I don't have any real science behind it. I think they feel differently because there's like a wider pattern around like where the tension rod goes, as opposed to a lot of the other die-cast hoops are real tight around it. If, you know what I'm saying?
They definitely feel different.
Yeah. So like I've always, and so when I played that drum, I mean, it sounds great, but I was like, for me, I'm like, I love the hella hoops. So I was like, man, if I got one of these, I would put hella hoops on it. So
let me show you. Look here.
You did exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, so I was actually over after I got this drum, I went over to my buddy Dave Elich's place, and he told me, he was like, let's just mess around with all the hoops right now. Let's just see what sounds like what. And we were just changing them out as quick as we can so we can remember what things sounded like. And once these went on, it was like, it changed the drum and it made it very unique. So this drum sounds like my drum, you know, just because of that versus the die-cast that come on her, but it doesn't match. I don't really care personally. Like, it would be great if I got matching ones, but I mean, it sounds good, and that's what matters to me.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, but it does make a huge difference on top and bottom. You know.
Yeah.
It cut down a ton. I found a ton of overtones, and I found that the drum has a bit of a wider range with these hoops. So I can drop it down pretty low, and throw some tape on there or some gels or something, and get a really fat tone. I could also crank this thing, and if I crank it, I don't need any muffling. Like, it kind of just kills it all by itself without completely killing the tone of the drum. Yeah. But I don't remember if I could do that with a die-cast because I haven't had them on for a while now.
Yeah.
But this is like my favorite drum I've ever owned. Really? I love this thing. Yeah, this thing is just, it's worth it. If you can get one, if you guys can find one, I mean, you cannot go wrong with this drum. I love it.
Yeah, I was talking, I think that was actually the snare. I was talking a while back with Near Z. He did an episode of this, and he was out with little Stevie from the E Street Band, and little Steven, and he was saying that he's kind of a stickler for like the Beatles, and and his whatever the Ludwig drum sound was of the '60s is what he hears drums to be. And so Near's like, I show up on his gig, I've got this Sonar drum set, and he's like, but he actually loved it, and he really loved that. He goes, that was the snare drum that won out.
Interesting.
He goes like, Near's like, I brought a few snares, thinking like, okay, I was kind of hip to what he was wanting, but I wanted to use, this is the drums I want to pick from, and he said that I think that was the snare that ended up being used the most that he dug on. So
that's interesting. For a Beatles sound, I wouldn't have thought that, but that's incredible.
Yeah. Who knows when it came to snare. I don't know if he just, wanted a vintagey thing, which I believe Near said he used his vintage kit, but yeah, I think that was the snare that he said won it. So as far as like your stuff with Sonar, man, how long have you been with the company as an endorser?
Oh man, I'm going to have to look that up. Maybe 5 years, maybe 5 or 6 years. So my history with Sonar is pretty incredible for me, at least, because when I was a kid and I was in school, I was in high school, I was getting pretty heavy into jazz, and I'd already done like jazz bands and stuff growing up, but I was really starting to find my love for it. And I had this one teacher, Mr. Huff, and he was the best. I mean, I would go to school at like 5:30 in the morning just to play with him, and he would teach me standards, and we'd play all the way up until homeroom, until eventually I didn't even go to homeroom anymore. I didn't go to any classes anymore. I just stayed in this room and just played all day long. And I barely got by, but it didn't matter because I knew I was going to music school. I already took care of all that part. So I remember this one day. Well, let me predate this. I went to see my uncle who lived in Manhattan when I was younger, and he snuck me to see the Mingus Big Band play when I was a kid. I was maybe 13 or 14, and I believe John Riley was playing. He was playing the Sonar kit, and it was just, I was blown away by what I was seeing on that stage. And I'll never forget watching like jazz happen in front of me for the first time. And it was something I'd never experienced, But there was a Sonar kit, and I was like, that's what I want. I want one of those. So I talked about them forever. I needed one of these Sonar kits, And at that time, Sonar was pretty big in the States still, like they were one of the main brands, You could get them at Sam Ash was around then, and Mars Music was around by me. And then I got into high school, and we had this beater kit. It was terrible. It was like, 4 different models of a Pearl kit for each drum was different. And it was really bad. And I got a phone call over the loudspeaker calling me down to the music wing. I went in, and I had been telling them to get a Sonar kit. So they did. They got,
Wow.
they got, man, I can't remember what model it was. Like a in mid 90s, whatever would have been like a nice intermediate level in the mid 90s. I can't remember which one. So I just spent all day unpacking it, building this kit, putting it together, and changing all the, looking at all the weird things. Cause Sonar does every now and then you'll find something like, what does this knob do?
Yeah.
I didn't know So I was looking for all these things, and it was just really incredible. And so I just always wanted to play Sonar, and I never forgot that, even when I go to college and then I start playing in like hardcore bands, and Sonar wasn't really on my radar at that point because I was just in a small hardcore band. I didn't think of getting another Sonar kit. But then when I joined Boy Sets Fire, and we spent a lot of time in Germany, and that's where most of our shows are. We tour almost exclusively Germany and like very close surrounding border countries,
Interesting.
And so that got me back in touch with them, and it's been incredible for multiple reasons, like my history and my love for them, but then also like the hardware is really great, and so that helps me a ton because I've played other companies before where hardware has to come from one backline company, drums come from another. And as a hired gun, sometimes that's a lot of expenses for the band to pay for you to get what you want, out of your endorsements. Yeah. Whereas they could save a lot of money just by saying, well, this is what comes from where we get our stuff, so just use that. So having everything come from one place has helped a lot. And then also having one person to speak to if there's a problem helps a lot. But I've also found a ton of versatility with the drums. And with like we were talking about earlier, with this 22, 12, 16 or 13, 16 with a vintage shell, I could play any style of music with that kit, and I don't believe that that's the case with all drum companies. I feel like I had to be more specific with my drum choices with other situations I've had in the past. Yeah, I don't feel that with this. I feel like I can tune them differently. All my drum techs I've ever worked with have always been like very excited to work with this kit because they know like their job's easy. I've had a tech for the 2 years I've been playing with Seal. I mean, he doesn't have to do anything. There's shows where he literally doesn't have to do anything. He's stoked. Yeah, and I don't blame him.
No. I always say, man, like with Jared, I don't have a tech, so I don't want to spend a lot of my day doing drum tech stuff. And honestly, I'm not the greatest at tuning. I know it sounds good. I can't say I have like my things, but with Sonar, it's like it's really easy, Yeah. And even the heads that come on them are Remo. That's what I use anyhow. But occasionally I'll get a backline Sonar kit that'll have some other manufacturer's heads that I would really struggle with on any other kit. But again, I just detune it. I start tuning it up a little bit, adjusting it, and lo and behold, it sounds really good. Yeah. So I think that's, and like you said, the versatility. I mean, I love what you have the vintage maple shells, right?
Right.
Or maple. Yeah. I love that, like in the Pro Light and I have a D-Light kit. I just love those drums. And anytime I get a Pro Light for backline, I'm like, oh, this drum set's going to sound great today. Like, I'm so excited. But it's like they're beach kits. I have the vintage kit. So you can see right here, I have some of those. They sound great, super versatile. In fact, these drums I've talked to quite a few guys about who everybody goes, yeah, they say vintage, but to me, all that means is you can get to the vintage sound really quick. again, change heads, change tuning a little bit, and you can totally do a more modern sounding gig with these drums. The SQ, the Birch drums, same thing. Like it's that's what I love about Sonar is like whatever you pick, and like you said, some other manufacturers, you might have to be a little more picky and go, well, from them, I only want this one, only want this wood, only want this series. With Sonar, I'm just like, man, whatever you've got, it'll sound great, so
Yeah.
just bring it.
I did one fly date with I was playing with Meg Myers. She's actually, I think, from Nashville at some point. She lived there.
I've heard her name. I was looking at her stuff. Yeah, I know of her name. I don't know her personally.
Yeah, she's great. And we were doing a show in Kansas City at the Kansas City Live outdoor venue. I'm not sure if you've played that. Yeah,
I played that not this past summer before that.
Yeah, it's great. Awesome series, really fun shows, and just totally worth it. But I remember being like talking to the backline company, and they said, we do have a Sonar kit in the back. Let me go grab it. And they brought me this yellow Force 3000. Dude, I loved it. It was such a great kit. It sounded incredible. It sounded so good. It had like a square, like I think like a 1313 tom. It was just ridiculous tom that I had to put. I looked like I was in an 80s hair metal band. I had to angle it so far just to get it low enough. But it sounded so good. And that's another example of like this kit was just in the back, and they just pulled it out. And they like had to clean it, and they had like old dusty heads, and they were like, "Do you mind?" I was like, "For some things I mind, for some I don't." So I changed a few. I kept the old one. It didn't matter. It just sounded so good. It was a blast to play too. There's also something about playing like a big, huge rack tom that's mounted off of the kick. It's just like you don't do that. Yeah, like that doesn't happen very often. So when you get it, like you play differently.
Oh yeah, for sure. I almost have the exact same story with an old Force kit. Somewhere in Florida, maybe the start of the end of last year, start of this year, before the pandemic happened. And same conversation. The backline guy called me. They said, "Yeah, we got Sonar kit. Great. Thought we were done." He calls me and says, we're gonna bring something else. I'm like, "Oh, is something wrong with the drum set?" Because I've even a couple of times they may have had a part missing, and I'll go to guys out at KHS, pick up the part, and I'll fly it out there, like, "Hey man, I'll fix it for you because I want to play these drums." But he goes, "Well, they're just really old." I'm like, kept kind of digging, like, "Are the shells cracked? Like, what's wrong with this kit?" He's like, "Well, we just haven't used it." I'm like, "Bring it." And they were already gonna be bringing 2 or 3 other kits for some other artists. There's a bunch of Nashville guys flying down, and so I thought, okay, something's wrong with it. There's other drum sets there. We were headlining, so I'd have pick of whatever. But yeah, we got there, and same thing. It was like an old red one. You had the original pedals, hi-hat stand. Like, it was crazy, man.
It's awesome.
It sounded great. I loved it. I had a blast, and I think I might have said this in an earlier one with somebody else in his interviews. The funny part was then seeing the other 2 or 3 brands of drums that were there, and literally A-Bing them, because you have me up there, you have the other 2 kits set up for the other drummers, and our front of house guy just was like, "Yeah, I'm really glad you picked that kit."
Isn't that a great feeling too when your front house guy is just like, "Thank you, like you made their job easier," which really makes the whole thing easier, because you don't spend forever hitting the kick drum for 5 minutes and everyone's like, "Come on, enough with that already," like
yeah. You
don't have to do that anymore.
No, exactly. So that's funny. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, just that as a working drummer is, if you get Sonar, you can trust it, because again, I won't mention names, but friends of mine who are with other companies, honestly, they'll be like, "Yeah, if I'm on the road, it's kind of shoddy. Who knows? I don't know what I'm going to get. I don't know if I can trust it. Now, if I call my guy and he handpicks this one, or if I get this certain whatever." With Sonar, I never feel that way. I'm like, as long as it's a Sonar drum set and it shows up, and again, hasn't been like literally damaged at some point, I'm good to go. Yeah, even if,
I mean, I've had plenty of them damaged, and they still sound great. There was my first experience performing with a Sonar kit once, actually right before I signed with them. It was when I just started speaking to them. It was actually in Japan. And what you're saying, I know we were talking about the Force kit in Kansas, but that obviously wasn't the first time that's happened. But this time in Japan, I was playing with the rentals, and we were playing Yokohama Center, and it was a pretty big show because that's a huge arena. Obviously, it's a big show, but tons of bands playing, and I had other friends playing in other bands, and one of which plays the same brand that I had played prior to. And then I had the first time that I had not performed with one of those kits as a backline company. So SONOR had sent this Pro Light kit for me. And the backline company did research, and they found pictures and videos of my setup. And when I showed up, it was all set up exactly how I'd have it set up. It was tuned almost perfectly. And they wheel my stuff out on the riser. I do this like perfect show. And I remember the whole time playing this arena, and like the snare that had hella hoops on it. The snare was just like cracking throughout the entire arena. It sounded absolutely brilliant. And prior to this, I was with some smaller boutique companies, and I never had that beautiful experience. I had like great drums, but I never had this where the whole kit was just speaking in unison. It was perfect. You know, I had no problems. Nothing moved, nothing fell, no hardware slipped, no drums detuned throughout the entire thing. I just could play. I just performed, and it was just exactly what I needed, where I wanted it to sound, how it needed to sound. And then I would watch my friends perform, and there was just like things falling off drums, cymbals flying off stands. Drums were detuning quickly. Like it was an eye-opening experience for me, saying like, wow, SONOR is a company that just gets it, you know? And just for what the way that I see things is how they see things. And so it makes it a very easy relationship.
Yeah. Wow, man, that's, you hit the nail on the head on so many points with them of, I think a lot of people, they had such a huge, at least for me, I think we're pretty close in age, but growing up in the States, like they were I remember just seeing them a lot, of that 80s, the big drums and the square sizes, and, then just being a German brand and not really kind of getting it. But then similar to you early on, when I was younger, seeing a few of the kits, and, at first just been, well, this is different. This looks different than other drums. I didn't know what sounded good, they sounded good. The guys playing them sounded good, but remembering that, and then, not only, again, just like the durability of like, oh, I bet these drums are tanks. And there's actually, as far as that, there was one time at the Baked Potato, I saw Danny Carey when he was playing with his older kits with Volto. It's like 04. I think it was like one of their first or second gigs. And he was just wailing. I've told this story before, man, but he was just like, I was sitting right at that table, right at the edge of the stage. And he was just, he's huge. He's killing this 14-inch tom that was hanging down. And it didn't move. And I was like, man, if that was like the drum set I had at the time, like if I smacked that thing, I'm like, lift it back up and tighten it. It was back when hanging toms were kind of the thing. But I literally that next day went to Hollywood Pro Drum with other said drums in the back of my car and said, they had one SONOR kit there. And I was like, I'll trade you all these for that. And they go, cool. But we can't give you any hardware with it. And I was like super broke college student at the time. So I'm like, well, I need hardware. And they're like, yeah, I'm sorry, man. Trade-ins are kind of what they are, which understandable. So that delayed my switch over some many years. But then you said just that that craftsmanship is not only, okay, yeah, the hardware is great, the shells are great. And that just makes the drums sound amazing, I struggle to find a time when I've not been happy with it. And again, it goes back to even, I think, going further back. It seems like they don't make decisions kind of just on chasing fads or whatever else. They're very, they've obviously got the history of manufacturing great drums to fall back on. But I kind of dig, they're like, man, we trust what we're doing, and we're going to go forward from there. And of course they do take input and they make adjustments and they evolve, but it's like there's this like standard of excellence that is always there. Kind of we were talking about earlier with our, your work as a player yourself. And when you have that, like you said, there's, again, I've said it before, there's not an era when I can think that SONOR made bad drums or anything that I wouldn't want to use or dig as far as sound goes.
Totally agree. They've helped me a ton. I touched on this for a minute, but like as a hired guy, they've helped me a ton, especially if you go to Europe, because it'll save the band a ton of money and a huge headache. And the TM or whoever's in charge of organizing gear rentals and returns and freight, all that stuff, I got that. Don't worry, I'll take care of the drums and I'll put you guys in touch after it's all taken care of. And that saves them a ton of headaches. And it really stands out, and it saves the band a lot of money. Not that that should be a huge thing to think about, but you don't want to have extra expenses, especially if you're just a hired guy. You don't want to be saying, cool, but this is what I come with, and I take care of it myself, and then just put them in touch afterwards. And that's a relationship that I have with the company, and I'm sure you do too. And I think that is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. No, man. I mean, they, I think there's still kind of like a, there's definitely a family feel, which, of course we call this SONOR Family of the company, I mean, from, of course, the guy who we all artists love and know, Mr. Thomas Barth, give him a shout out. Who's over in Germany. Yeah. But then, the other guys who I've met, who are involved in different levels of the company, friends on Facebook, comment, like, it's but they, especially the people who are there actually on the manufacturing side in Germany, there's definitely there's a huge amount of pride in what they're doing and the products they're making. And I think that it definitely is shown in the final results with the drums. And again, like I've always said, if you're going to be like super into your chosen art here, playing the drum set and trying to, be the level of musician you want to be and work at the level you want to work, you want to know that the equipment you're using, the people who made it have that same kind of, level of expectation when you get it.
Yeah, and totally.
And I think the other thing, one last point I'll make on it is literally we were talking about before of situations on gigs, especially with the hired gun. I mean, there's a couple of brands, mainly like with hardware, where, I know that after like 5 songs, that cymbal stand's going to just like, the boom's arm's going to fall over. It happens every time, and again, all everybody knows, they hear a boom crash and you miss something. And then everybody turns around like, what's up? What the hell's this dude doing tonight? And like, you can't go, no guys, seriously, like, I knew this was going to happen. I asked, you can't explain it. And then maybe afterwards, if they still want to go on about it, you can explain what happened. But that's that other confidence thing of, and people at home who may not work on backline equipment. Sometimes, man, it's just literally throw and go is what we call it. You just walk up there and you might get 5 minutes to adjust a cymbal, a snare height, hi-hat height, whatever, and you just got to go. And if there's 4 different steps to tightening your cymbal arm, you want to get to check all those. And like I think I love about all the SONOR gear is, while it is super heavy duty as far as the hardware goes, it's not like way overthought as far as adjustments. I know it's like tighten there, boom.
How great is this?
Oh yes.
Like, yeah. Okay, throw and go, no problem. Like,
I know, yeah.
We're good. That's the best. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually had I got like stealth racks from a tour for Gibraltar, and they gave me the arms, and I was like, all right, because I didn't want to have to cut down my SONOR ones, but I got so annoyed, and I went and just stripped all the quick release stops off my SONOR stuff. I'm like, it's just so annoying every night to do that, but. It's simple. It's got the working drummer in mind, so that, if you loosen that up, then it falls over there and you're chasing it down, you lose it. So, so I definitely dig obviously the high level quality, which, people would think of more to boutique level, but then like a lot of the kind of practical working level stuff that they put in the drums. And if nothing else, there's just the working level of like, if you invest in a SONOR kit, it's an investment, man. It's not gonna, you're not going to lose money on it, The drums you're not going to have issues on down the road. Like they're going to be solid for decades to come.
Yeah. Well, another cool thing about the company is outside of the, Thomas becoming like one of my closest friends in, outside of just being with the SONOR connection. I mean, he's just one of my closest friends through this relationship. But there's also this connection that I've made with a lot of other SONOR artists, yourself, being on tour. I remember I was playing with the Bronx, and we had van issues in Canada. And so we get a hotel, and Beck is playing across the street. And so I know the drum tech. We go over. Chris Coleman's playing. Now, like Chris and I, like, we spent a couple hours just chatting and just talking. And there's a connection through Sonar. And so I stand next to him, watch him play the whole set. And it was just incredible. Like, so it's not just the drums and you're just like, oh, everyone plays his drums. There's kind of a thing. Like when you meet another Sonar artist or a Sonar lover, there's a thing, there's a connection.
Yeah.
It's really incredible.
I honestly, man, that's like, couldn't have said better myself. And that was really the way I started doing these was, talking to Thomas and the guys, like basically record these conversations that happen in a green room, on a bus, in a hotel, whatever, of, different Sonar artists, even different Sonar fans, I mean, like it's, again, there's qualities, there's something you can buy into both as a fan of the drums and then also, as an endorser of like, this is someplace I don't really see a reason to leave. I mean, it's, as long as they keep doing what they're doing, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So,
same.
Yeah.
Same.
So that's great. Well, man, thanks so much for doing this. It's been great. We've obviously been chatting a little bit before this, and same, like we were saying, it's great to kind of meet another member of the SONOR family and get to know you a little better. And I think, hopefully people who watch this, especially some of the working guys or people who are interested in becoming a working drummer will get a lot of good information about things to consider when you're looking at working with different artists. And if you want to have that, if you want to not just commit to one band, if you want to say, I want to be someone who has the ability to work with, multiple people, I think there's going to be tons of great stuff they can pull from that. But before we wrap up, if people want to kind of keep tabs on what you've got going on now, and of course in the future when things start opening up, where's the best place they can find you as far as internet or social media goes?
Yeah, I have a website, jaredshavelson.com. But I guess Instagram is the one that I'd be the most active on posting stuff because the bands I'd work with will be more active on those things. But I try to keep it up to date, when everything does start again, the bands that I'm working with that would be the most active would be Seal, Boy Sets Fire, Mariachi El Bronx, my newest band called Ways Away. That's one that I'm really proud of that we've been working on. And then also online, I have this drum hang similar to what you're doing that I started with my buddy who shares the space with me, and it's called the Beat Off. So I try to keep things updated there as well too.
Yeah, I like it. You never know what crowd you're going to get with that, right?
Yeah, you don't really know, but we kind of all the same stuff that we talked about here. It's there's a connection that you have between even if it's outside of the SONOR family, just musicians touring, working musicians. There's some incredible conversations that come up and really hilarious tour stories. And I've known this guy for almost 20 years. So we have a lot of the same friends and it's just a place to go hang out and just talk and just see stupid things and then maybe play drums every now and then,
What's better?
Yeah. Right.
Well, cool. Well, Jared, thanks again, man. This was really fun. And for all you at home, thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next one.
Take care.